you are Christina Strain. You are a writer. You have a new Netflix film out, Finding Ohana. I'm going to post this on the day that the film is out. But I do want to give a bit of a background to you because one of the places that I'm going to be posting this has a large audience that follows kind of the nerdier content with comics and things like that. And you actually used to work in the comic industry. So would you like to share a bit about, starting as, what is it called, a colorist, and then being a writer, and just how that kind of shaped you creatively and professionally in your career?
Yeah, let's start a little bit earlier than when I started working in comics, just to give full context. But I grew up in Korea. My mom is Korean. My dad is a white dude from Louisiana. They met because he was serving in the military, and I was born and raised in Korea because my parents met there, got married. I was born, then they divorced. Not all in not all in the span of like a 2-year tour, but like over time, basically my dad kept going back to Korea. And so when my parents got divorced, I grew up there. And because I grew up in Asia in the 90s, which was one of the best times for anime and manga, I grew up reading anime, or reading manga and watching anime. So I had a big comic book background going into college. And so when I turned 18, I had to move back to the States because I'm a US citizen. I was born on a base. And so when I got to the States, the big question at that point was what do you want to do for a living? Now, I have a Korean mom who is, I hate to say, super stereotypical in the way that she wanted my life to unfold, but she very much wanted me to be a doctor or a lawyer. So initially I thought I was going to be like a computer programmer and go the engineering route. But in going to college, and I went to Louisiana State University, I went on a full scholarship, and for the first time in my life I kind of had the freedom to do whatever the heck I wanted. And I went back to the fact that I really loved doing art, and I wanted to do comic books because that's how I grew up drawing comics in secret because I grew up reading them. So I ended up working in comics because I just in college I pursued it like crazy. I figured out how American comics worked. I read a bunch of American comics, got into it, fell in with a group of friends who were super into comics too, and they also wanted to break in. And I just basically at night colored on Photoshop constantly. I would spend all the money that I saved when I was in college working my jobs, going to conventions, and showing my portfolio. And I broke in as a colorist starting at a place called CrossGen that no longer exists, but then shortly after that getting hired by Marvel and working on a comic. My first comic that I worked on at Marvel was a comic book called Runaways, which became a freeform show. So it's been an interesting career for me, watching some of the things that I colored in the early 2000s become live action things. Like there's a VFX budget for Carolina's Powers. You could have never, I never would have thought as a 20-something-year-old who came up with a Photoshop effect that would be the future for that, somebody in the future would be looking at this thing that's printed and going, how do we make that real? So yeah, that's my background in comics. And then I colored for Marvel for 10 years.
Yeah, it was interesting because I was trying to do a bit of research to prepare for talking to you. And I found an interview where you were talking about picking certain characters that were not as popular at the time and you wanted to put them in the spotlight. And in particular, something that really stood out to me was this Korean character called White Fox. And it was very interesting to read what you were saying about picking that character, because essentially you were sort of being asked or told or recommended to make her a sidekick to Captain Marvel, essentially. So, and you kind of put your foot down and were like, no, we can actually just have our own stories.
So that one was interesting. So I colored for 10 years. And then when I left coloring, I pursued writing. And then as soon as I got a job writing television, Marvel called editors that I'd worked with in the past called me again to see if I was interested in writing for Marvel this go around. And the first thing they brought to me was this White Fox short story that happened during Civil War II a few years ago. And the pitch the editor made to me was, they were like, we're doing this thing with Civil War. And essentially there was this plot point where it was like, are you on the side of Captain Marvel doing, this and this? And I just had a moment with him where I was like, so here's the history of Korea, South Korea in particular. Like the part of the reason that that country was divided in half was because at the end of the Korean War, there was an armistice agreement signed between North Korea and the US. And in that moment, like the people who were in the room making the decision were North Korea, Russia, China, and the US. Nobody from South Korea was allowed in that room. So the sheer fact that the US presence in South Korea is a point of contention for a lot of Koreans, specifically because it is like America chose to divide our country in half and we didn't have any say in that. So I told him, I was like, I don't like the notion of, you know, Americans showing up to a Korean character and being like, you know, join us and we'll take care of you. Because the reality is, like, one of the things that South Korea has, you know, lobbied for against like the US presence is just like, we can take care of ourselves. Like, yes, there is a very delicate balance here, and the US presence in South Korea is a good thing for the world. That being said, like, South Koreans they want to make decisions for themselves now. So there's like this whole thing about South Korean politics with America that is like, I won't get into because a lot of people don't understand them and don't want to go into it. But like, when I pitched back to him that basically White Fox be like, we can take care of ourselves, he totally got it. So I was really happy that they allowed me to do that, because I just was like, every bone of my South Korean raised body is like, feel cool with this. Let's not do that.
Yeah. Well, and I was really excited when you agreed to do an interview with me, because I've been following you on Twitter for about a year now, because I started lurking on all things related to Shadow and Bone. And one of the things that I've seen you repeatedly talk about is just how important it is to tell stories with Asian leads, and, you know, whether it's Asian leads in a general sense or Asian girls and half Asians specifically. So, you know, it's really important that we're receiving top billing, because that shapes how people see us.
Yeah, and then on top of that, I think it's a little question of how we see ourselves. Like, it's amazing how important it is to, one, see yourself represented at all, and two, like, understand the representation that you are seeing, because it cuts both ways. You know, the tricky thing about representation is there is no version of representation that is a one size fits all perfect thing for anybody. But the sheer fact that you can see a person on, you know, as number one on the call sheet is a huge thing, because somebody out there is going to see that, and it is going to occur to them that that is possible. And like, for me in particular, Shadow and Bone was a eye-opening experience, because I am a half Korean woman who, you know, grew up without a lot of Asian representation on TV, but the little bits that I saw meant the world to me. Like Margaret Cho and Ki Kwan were like people that, like, actors, like, whenever I saw them on television, it just occurred to me that this was possible. So there was that. But then the thing with Shadow and Bone that was interesting to me was when, like, when Eric approached me about possibly being staffed on season 1, I read the pilot and I was blown away, because I felt something that I hadn't felt before. And it was, I read this pilot where a half Asian lead was in it. And so when I met with him, I was like, are you actually going to try to get a half Asian? Like, are you actually going to set out to get a half Asian and tell a story about a girl who, like, lives in a country where people, like, point out, you're not one of us? And he was like, yeah. And it shocked me, because I started thinking about my own scripts and realized I am a half Asian woman who has never written a script with a half Asian lead, because in my mind, all I've ever tried to write is full Asian leads, because I know it is difficult. Like, it's easy to cast a half Asian when you are looking for somebody who is going to be in a role that it doesn't matter what their race is, and then you retroactively mention that they're half Asian because you happen to cast a half Asian. But to actually seek out those roles is really difficult. And I guess that, like, my brain subconsciously hadn't considered trying to do my own representation. So, like, I was, like, immediately emotionally struck by the realization that I hadn't even tried this. And here's this white dude trying to do something that I should have been doing. And I was like, I need to be on the show.
Yeah.
Oh, crap. I need to be on the show.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
I mean, I definitely want to talk a bit more about Shadow and Bone before we close this interview, but I want to make sure that we plug your new film, Finding Ohana, because you mentioned Ki Kwan, actually, and that was going to be my segue, because Ki Kwan is someone who you have talked about in some of the other interviews to promote this film, and you're explaining about how important his work was back in, decades past to you growing up, and also he is in the film. So do you want to talk a bit about the significance of him and, getting him into the film?
Yes. Like, oh my God. So having Ki Kwan in this film is a very emotional thing for me. And it's amazing because like it all ended with me having a dinner with him and like being able to tell this guy, like, you're the reason this movie exists. Like, I don't think you fully, like, I know that you were an influence for a lot of up and coming Asians in the entertainment industry, but I just want you to know from the mouth of the person who came up with the idea for this movie, like, you're the reason this movie exists. So thank you for existing. Like, thank you for going through everything that you went through and like being in those roles, because like Ki Kwan was in two very influential movies for me growing up. Like, Indiana Jones, I love Indiana Jones, period. But like Temple of Doom, when I was a kid, was one of my favorites, specifically because of Short Round. Because like Ki Kwan was an Asian kid in a role where he was saving Indiana Jones's ass. Like, he is legitimately in that movie is so necessary. He saves Dr. Jones and like gets him through it. And then also Goonies, because again, Ki Kwan was there. And like, in retrospect, I think part of the reason those two movies like imprinted so heavily on me as a child was because I could see myself in those adventures through Ki Kwan. Like, there wasn't a ton of representation for us at the time. And I was like, this like spunky girl who was very much a tomboy. And all I was seeing were, white girls who were like kind of the sidekick, maybe a little precocious, but nowhere near as like headstrong or adventure driven as like these male components. But they're male counteractives, but like counters, foils, whatever. But Ki Kwan was at least Asian. So I was at least seeing myself through him on these adventures in a way that like I wanted to be represented. So when I decided to write like, an adventure movie, like the first thing I thought was, I was like, I want to write Goonies full of Data. Like, I just want to write Goonies in Hawaii. And I want the majority of the kids to be Asian American Pacific Islander kids who are mixed race, but in general, these are Hawaiian kids. And all of that stems from the fact that I saw Ki Kwan in Goonies, and that movie left a huge impression on me. So like, and then the reason we got him, and this is just all serendipity, like our director, Jude, she's amazing. And she was super excited to be directing this film. And she and I had multiple conversations before Netflix bought it about she was attached before Netflix bought it about like the inspirations behind this movie and what this movie meant to me and what I was looking for and what it all was. And like, in her starting to kind of like plan it all out and knowing that it was a very Indiana Jones Goonie thing, like she's at like a restaurant getting like frozen yogurt or something. And she's talking about this thing to somebody and she mentions Indiana Jones and she like hears a voice like say something like, are you talking about Indiana Jones? And it's freaking Ki Kwan in the same location that Jude's at. And that's how they connected. So then the second they connected, Jude was like, we need him in the movie. Like, figure out like how to get him. Like, we need to put him in this movie. You wrote this movie because of him. Put him in the movie. And I was just like, okay, yes. So then it was just like, we got him in the movie. This is like, so it is bananas. And then, yeah, again, like after we shot and everything, and while it was in post, Key and I got dinner because I wasn't able to be on set when he was on set. And Jude was great. Like, she recorded a message of him. Like, they tried to call me and I was like in the room or something on another show, and he left a message for me, but they recorded him like leaving the message and sent it to me and then got me in contact with him. And then when he was back in LA, he and I like went and got dinner, and I just was able to tell him like, I just want you to understand this, like, you are the spark that ignited this whole thing. I just want you to know, like, you are why representation matters. Like, this movie is the product of you existing. So thank you. And that was like, one of the highlights of my life.
So with finding Ohana and it being a film that is in Hawaii and it's got characters that are Hawaiian, how did you approach the cultural aspects? Because I don't know if you had any familiarity, because there's characters going in and out of using English versus speaking with the Hawaiian language, and there's just other cultural idiosyncrasies and cultural references. So I wasn't sure. Part of me wondered before I found out that you were on a base in South Korea if you had actually lived in Hawaii at some point before. So
I get asked this question a lot. The reality of this movie is I had a lot of help on the cultural side of things. So the origin of this movie is very personal for me. Like I wrote this movie for multiple reasons. You know, I wanted to write Goonies. The reason I wanted to set it in Hawaii was very specific to me. Like I grew up in Korea and I moved to the US when I was 18. And I had a fair amount of culture shock when I got here because I'm an American, but I didn't really spend a lot of time in the US. So there were a lot of things about me that I didn't realize were a lot more Korean. So like there was this weird sort of reverse feeling that I went through where I was like an American going through culture shock. So since moving to the States, I've lived in a few different places. And for me, I still call Korea home because it's the place that I became who I am. But I look at New York City as a place that feels very much on the surface like Seoul because it's a metropolitan city. LA feels very comfortable for me because it's got a huge Korean population. And then Hawaii, the first time I went to Hawaii, I was like, this is a place that feels super comfortable to me in a way that is very specific to myself. Because I grew up on a military base with a lot of mixed race kids. You know, we're talking like Filipino, Korean, Samoan, like white, black kids who were, you know, all the children of service members or, you know, federal employees who like worked on the base, that it was a very multicultural experience that I had growing up that was very specific to me. Like there aren't that many places in the US that feel this way to me. And so the first time I went to Hawaii, I was like, oh, this is it. This is the feeling. This is a place that I could easily retire and move to and feel like I came back home because like I feel comfortable here. And there are like multiple reasons why Hawaii like appeals to me on that very personal level. But the real thing that it came down to was it was like, this is the melting pot that I grew up with. It feels right. So like when I wrote the first draft of Finding Ohana, I was actually in grad school. Like I never wrote this movie thinking it would get sold. I wrote a movie for myself and I set it in a place that like felt like home to me. So the idea of Peely being a kid, you know, who grew up outside of where, you know, their cultural and ethnic background is, you know, going back to that place and like having a certain amount of culture shock and trying to understand what all that meant. That was very much coming from the place of me moving to the US. And then at the same time, like, you know, me understand, like, I wanted to write about a more specific culture, and Hawaii felt right that way because you go there and that place is so steeped in its own culture in a way that, you know, it's part of the US, but it's its own place. So that's where
it was annexed. It was its own place. And then the US was like, just kidding. We own you. You have a lot of nice resources, but let me not go on that rant. I don't want to overstep, like act like I'm more angry than Hawaiians, but.
No, but all of that stuff is 1,000% true, which kind of goes back to, once again, what I was telling you, like growing up in South Korea in a place that feels like they didn't have any control. Like there was a lot about Hawaii that felt familiar to me. So I put a lot of my own personal experiences into the first draft because I was just writing this movie for myself and nobody else. Like it was very much a thing for me. So then when Netflix bought it, at that point, before they bought it, like the serious conversation that I had with Netflix was a few things where it was just like, listen, I don't like, I've met with other places that had interest in this. And like, the thing was always like, nobody wanted to like outright buy it, but because it was always because we don't know how to cast this. Like, how are you going to put Hawaiian kids in it? But Netflix made that commitment. And the thing that I said to Netflix was like, I don't want it to be whitewashed. Like, I don't want to contribute to that. Like, I'm not going to write a thing and then like, make it whiter for you guys. And they were like my exec was amazing. She was like, no, we don't want that. That's why we want this. And then two, you know, I was like, look, you know, I want Jude to come along because Jude and I both feel the same way about this. We feel a connection to this piece. And like, you know, also we're going to need consultants because like Jude and I both agreed, you know, we are like, it's unfortunate that Pacific Islanders get grouped with Asian Americans because it's like, it's its own blanket thing. But I was like, I've seen Korea portrayed incorrectly. I don't want to do that. Like, can we get consultants and do as best, like the best version of it that we can. So we had multiple consultants on the cultural level. I wrote dialogue, and then we had a consultant who translated translated it into Pidgin. Plus our actor Branscombe, like Kelly and Branscombe are from Hawaii. Like when Kelly like speaks with a slight Pidgin like a slight accent, that is her actual accent, having grown up there. And then Branscombe is just like, I'm just talking like my family, like, so it was great because we had a combination of people helping with me on the script level. And then we did the thing. We cast the people that we needed to cast for it to make it much more authentic. And we got out of their way. Right? We were just like, you do what you need to do. I'm a piece back here and let you do your thing. And it was great. So that was like one of the best experiences about the whole thing. Like, I had a very personal, emotional story to tell because, like, again, I didn't grow up with my dad. He was in the military. Like, I moved in with my dad when I went to college. Like, there's a lot of interpersonal family stuff that is specific to my own experience. The fact that Peely is who she is, again, she's the character I wanted to see growing up. That is the kind of lead character I wanted. So there was a lot of stuff about that script that's specific to me and it is mine. But the cultural stuff, like, we had so much assistance on that, and we just got out of people's way. That's really what it came down to. Like, we did everything we could for the story, and then it was just like, so what do we, like, you tell me what's right, what's wrong. I will listen to you and take your guidance on this and make it all work. Like, so yeah, we were very lucky to have the people involved that we had.
Yeah, and I really enjoyed the film because it sort of felt like if Indiana Jones, especially the Temple of Doom specifically as a film, if it actually had more like emotional heart and developed characters and wasn't racist, of a film. Because I rewatched that recently and I had not seen it since, I don't know, I was probably a child or whatever. And I was horrified and I Googled it. And as it turns out, apparently it was banned in India when it first came out because of how racist it was or something like that. And I'm just going, yeah, I don't blame them. I don't blame the Indians at all. Like, I would have done the same thing if I was Indian.
Completely. Yeah. No, there's a bunch of stuff. And if you rewatch some films, and Indiana Jones is not clear of this, you watch the stuff that takes place in Nepal in the first movie, and it's people with their eyes taped. Like, there's a lot in those movies. It's not okay now.
Yeah.
But it's just like, it's one of those things where, like, when you grow up with it, that's all you have. Like, that's the tragedy, right? Which is why, like it, in the world that I live in right now, having grown up with all that stuff, I didn't want to F it up. Like, I didn't want to fuck it up. My intention was never to do anything that was doing harm. So I wanted to pay as much honor to Hawaii as possible, which is why it was just like, if you're going to do this, if you guys want to make this, let's do the best version of it we can, the most authentic, like, let's bring in the people that we need to help us get this right and just get out of their way, And it was great in that way. Like, there's a lot of stuff in that movie that I look at and I'm just like, Branscombe brought that to it, like, our consultants brought this to it. We had multiple consultants on multiple levels. We had a cultural consultant. We had a supernatural, like Hawaiian, like supernatural and spiritual consultant. We had a Hawaiian geocaching consultant who, like, I was like, yo, man, I mostly do escape rooms. Can you help me more with the geocaching side of it? Because, like, I love the concept of geocaching, but now that I have children, I don't have the time. So it was great on multiple levels. There are so many little scenes in that movie that I can, like, very much tell you the inspiration of that, or even the concept for that exists because we had a consultant who was just like, this is not how we would do this here. Or, when I do this, like, here, this is what I do. And it was just like, oh, we're going to add that to the script because I think that's amazing. Like, it hadn't considered to me because I haven't lived that experience. So yeah, it was a lot of collaborating in a good way.
I love how the first scene that has Peely and Ioane meeting their grandfather, not that they've never met him before, but that his greeting is to take out a mango, cut off some slices and feed them. And I'm like, oh my God, that's so, like, I mean, I'm not Pacific Islander, I'm Asian, but the whole, like, you show love through food.
Yes. Dude, So that's one of those things that like I very much picked up on when I was in Hawaii, and I identify with because I'm Asian, and I just feel like that is very much a mutual thing. And yeah, so it's great because it feels real on multiple levels, and you're just like, yeah, that's exactly what your grandparent would do. I love them.
Yeah. I mean, I love that grandfather character. He's just such a character. I mean, he's so, like it was almost a little bit of an emotional gut punch when he scolds his daughter for not teaching the kids Hawaiian, and I was like, "Oh my God, don't bring my emotional baggage about being rusty with my Japanese into this." Like, this is, it's so rare that writers like you, are able to not only get hired for jobs, but to tell stories that actually reflect what our lives are like. And I was like, oh no, my baggage. Oh no.
I think that's the thing though, right? Like it was, and I like to call myself 1.5 gen Korean American because I actually grew up in Korea, but on a military base. So there's like a weird in between there. But like, it's a weird experience because like, especially now that I'm a parent, I'm going through this thing where my 2 adopted Korean kids, I'm just like, am I giving you enough of a Korean experience? Like, so all of that stuff, it just goes in there. And I don't think it's different for anybody who's an immigrant kid or anybody who grows up away from their culture. Like, I think they go through these similar experiences and we just don't ever see them reflected on TV in a way. So I put all of that stuff in there then. Like that's all my own. Your baggage and my baggage are very similar.
Well, even Ioane, when he's talking about he got sick of having to explain how to pronounce his name, and I like wanted to scream because I'm just going, first of all, Hawaiian names are not difficult. It's a bunch of vowel sounds. So that like upset me but also it's just that it's that age-old thing of, Asian immigrants or diaspora having to have like I have a Japanese name and I have my other name that I use on all my whatever, and it's like maybe it was fine for the time because obviously I wasn't born yesterday, but like if I was gonna choose my life now, like I don't know if I would really want to do that because it's like, why do I have to whitewash myself?
Well, it's that question of like when you're the other, you're constantly negotiating with yourself about how much to repeat yourself and to have to educate people about where you're from versus the ease of assimilation. There is that constant battle you're feeling, right? Like you're just like, do I really want to explain to this person how to pronounce my name all like over and over and over again? Do I really want to explain to this person like what's the easiest version of my existing? And I think when you're a kid in particular, when you're not, it takes time to be aware of what kind of societal pressures do to make you want to suppress and erase your identity. But I think that like, it's a natural thing for kids to go through. Like the whole conversation E has about his name, like so much of that stemmed from the fact that like I was born with a Western name. I know that my name would have been Hera if my mom had given me a Korean name, but my middle name is also Cho, which is a last name. And like the reason it's that is like,
oh, you don't have a Korean name?
I don't have a Korean name. My mom, because I was born in 81, my mom did the assimilating thing where it was like, give her a Western name. And I grapple with this all the time. Like my kids were born Korean names and we ended up making their Korean names their middle name and then giving them a Western.
That's what my mother did. Yeah.
And I'm just like, should I have left their birth names, their first name and their Western name, their middle name? Like you overthink these things because you're just constantly asking yourself, what's going to make your kid's life easiest? And that's what it is to be an other in a society. You're always like, negotiating how much of me needs to assimilate and how much of me needs to assert and educate people on like where I'm from. So like this is a perfect example of like, there's a lot in this movie that, I wanted to make sure was specific to Hawaii, but I do think that there is an experience that anybody who is an other, especially Asian Americans, can like see this and identify with very deeply because like you can be an American, but definitely feel like you're out in some way, shape or another. You're an other and you just are constantly dealing with that.
Yeah. I mean, I will say that one of the more delightful overlaps between Asians and Hawaiians that was on display on this film was our mutual love for our king, Keanu Reeves.
Right?
So at what point was that put into the script where you're going, well, I gotta...
Day one. You know, when I wrote this, again, because I wrote this for myself, like Keanu was one of those people that I grew up like having, you know, a thirst for. Like I was like,
oh, we all did, and we all still do.
Yes, like
that never goes
American
away.
King. Dude, it was one of those things where I was like, how could I not? Like, I am so much of this movie is just me putting various facets of myself on display for the world. Like, I'm like, Keanu, yes. I love him.
Because you've got the daughter coming in and be like seeing the poster and just going breathtaking, which also made me laugh because that's a meme and I love memes. And then the mother comes in and she also kisses the poster. Yes! I'm like, Dude,
I got to give credit. I think the breathtaking was Jude telling like Kea to improv that. And then I'm pretty sure, like, because I didn't script the kiss. So I'm pretty sure that was Kelly just being like, I would. Oh, I know what it was. I think originally there had been a photo with an old kiss mark on it where it was clearly she had kissed it as when she was younger. So I think Kelly was just like, I love it. So good.
I also love that there was a joke in there where Peely is scolding her brother for how he's making the food. And like, no salt, no pepper, no flavor. Who is this for? We ain't white. And I was like, I make jokes like that all the time.
I'm going to give Netflix some credit here. I put that in the script, right? And they initially were like, sure. I was like, if you don't think we don't talk this way, you're wrong.
Yeah.
This is just, and so when they had in the table read, they were like, it's okay. It totally is. Yes.
And that bothers me as well because like any other type of, whether you're Black, Indigenous, a person of color, of any type of person of color, we are constantly the punchline of jokes. If you can't take a joke about your food being bland, like you tore the world apart for spices that you now don't use in your food, and you can't take a joke about that. Like,
well, dude, yes.
I just really wanted to make sure that I put a spotlight on that and go, yes, I'm validating this. This is hilarious. We need more jokes about white people's food being bland, because at the very least, like, you give us so little, you need to give us the freedom to make that joke because it's accurate and it's funny and it's real. So
it's also accurate to the way that Asians talk, for real, like straight up, like to not talk about food in the way it is like seasoned and flavored. Like, come on, like anybody who does a lot of cooking, and I think that like Hawaiian families, they do a lot of really good cooking, man, and it's good flavorful food. So like, yes.
Did you get to have any kalua pig while you were in Hawaii?
Oh yeah, no, I mean, Hawaii is like the one place in the world, aside from Korea. Actually, this makes a lot of sense now. There are two places in the world that I repeatedly go back to, and it's Korea and Hawaii. Like, and I don't, you know, I have family in Korea and it is my home. Hawaii, I just love being there. Like being there rejuvenates me in a way that very few places do. So like I try to go to Hawaii as often as humanly possible. Like for a while there, I was going at least once a year. So like every time I go back, I'm just like, feed me the food, man. Also, I really appreciate that Hawaiian fast food incorporates Korean food. Like their version of our short ribs and kalbi is just like, it's delicious. So I'm like, give it to me. I'll take all of it. Thank you.
Yeah, I've only been to Hawaii once about 1,000,000 years ago when I was, I forget exactly how old. It was a school trip, you know, so it was forever ago. I wouldn't even recognize myself back then. So I thought it was lovely and amazing, but I'm sure I would have an even stronger impression of it going now because I'm just a different person now. And I would be so just hungry to go experience everything and try all the food and, you know, embark on different cultural things. Another thing that I wanted to highlight that you put into the film, or maybe you did, or somebody on the film did, was just kind of the acknowledgement of the kind of dark side of tourism when it comes to Hawaii. And, you know, there was I'm like, I keep towing the line of like, I don't know how much or how little in terms of spoilers I want to talk about, but basically, you know, they're talking about, well, you know, I don't know if this is necessarily a good thing, because if a bunch of tourists want to come here and they're going to tear this place up, that's not what is good for this area, this
Yes.
place, and Hawaii in general. So, you know, at what point was that? I mean, was that from you? And, you know, talk about putting that into the story.
I'm trying to think. I'm pretty sure that was me, but there were multiple drafts of the script that it showed up in varying ways. I do know the part where they go to Mokuli'i Island and they talk about how like tourists were like destroying the you know, the ground and eroding the ground. That came out of a conversation we had with one of our, like, it wasn't a suggested ad, it was just, it did come up in a conversation with one of our consultants, and I just wanted to throw it in there because I do feel like in my research when I wrote this script, like I did research on Hawaiian, you know, culture and stuff, and I wrote a fantastical version of it, but like the more I got into it, the more I was just like, there is something interesting in here about the idea that you shouldn't go into caves that I think goes beyond, you know, the ecology of it all and being like, you're going to destroy the ground and everything. I think the other thing is just that you are being disrespectful to the culture of it all. And so like, that was the inspiration for it. Like the idea that I knew that going into these caves was forbidden for specific reasons. And I think that like, just in doing multiple drafts, like that moment that you're talking about with Hana and Pili, where they're talking about like why they can't and can do certain things, came out of me rewriting that scene and being like, you know, this is about so much more than just
Money.
destroying. Yeah, it's more than money. It's more than destroying the environment. It's also like about respecting the culture of it all, because like the truth of the matter is like part of the reason that I didn't want a certain thing to happen in the end is like, I love Indiana Jones. I loved like the Uncharted games, and I love like Tomb Raider. But the question that I always ask myself at the end is like, at what cost did it come at? Because like you've just destroyed cultural, like you've stolen treasure from other cultures, and you've just destroyed archaeological finds. And like, I get it. Like if you discover a tomb, of course archaeologists are going to go there, but you know, at what cost? And for me, on the Korean side of things, you know, like Korea is a country that doesn't have a lot of its own relics. Like we don't have a ton of museums full of Korean treasures. We have a lot of museums, but like we could have more had we not been plundered by the Japanese and like, you know, like other cultures that have come through. Like Korea doesn't have nearly as many of its artifacts as it should. Like there have been times where I've been at like the Met and been like, why do you have Korean artifacts here? Should these go back to Korea? You know what I mean? Like stuff like that, where I'm just like, it was like a combination of my feelings about the state of like, you know, where things should be and how, you know, colonizers have taken things like the stories we tell ourselves in entertainment is like, Tomb Raider, it's great. Like I love Indiana Jones, but as an adult, one of the things that I genuinely struggle with is it's like, does it belong in a museum? Like, in whose fucking museum, mister? So it was like a culmination of things. Like that was definitely me, but it was just like, I can't tell you which draft it was, because it was just like a confluence of thoughts and feelings that came together in the ultimately like what it was that just felt right.
Yeah. I mean, it was so refreshing to have a story that clearly has a voice and perspective that touches on this understanding of just how horrific colonialism is, and just how perpetual the aftermath is, and just the scars that linger in so many different areas of society. I know society, you can hardly use the word society anymore. It feels like a meme, but like in all seriousness, you know, it was just such a refreshing film to watch, because I mean, going into watching it, I really didn't know what to expect, because you know, the trailer doesn't really give that much away. I only was watching it because I wanted to talk to you, and I was like, oh, this is a great opportunity. She's got a new thing coming out. Let me watch it. And it was so, you know, it wasn't just the surface level performative inclusion or representation. It was like a really meaningful story. It was about family and culture and identity and heritage, but also it didn't feel like oh, I'll suffer through this kid's film because I'm not a parent, but you know what I mean? Like it didn't have that air of like, well, it's bearable, you know, if I have to watch something that's friendly for children, because some films are like that.
Yes.
And this one, you know, you have scenes between Kelly Hu and her father. Yeah, where they're, you know, they're working through their issues, and it was you know, it was just really well-rounded of a film and a story. So
yeah, that was one of the things that I'm most proud of what we accomplished in this, was that like what I originally set out, like it's very easy for me to say it's Goonies in Hawaii because that was like the start of the idea, but the reality of what I was yearning to write was a story about identity, heritage, or you know, like, and like adventure, you know, like I wanted to write a real personal story from my perspective about like, you know, to some extent it's my own commentary on what I grew up with, where it's just like, I love Goonies, but what's the deeper message? You know, like I love Goonies so much, but like to me, what is the more satisfying treasure to walk away with? And I think that like, for me, the story that I was really telling with Peely was like, this is a girl who's looking for who she is, you know, and who she is, she thinks is one thing, but the reality of who she is, she discovers is a little bit of a different story. So I was I'm very proud of what we accomplished in the film, because I think all of us were on the same page. And I think that like, one thing that really helped was like my director, Jude, like when I first met with her, when she asked me, what is, you know, is this really about? I was able to express to her what I really wanted to say. And she got that, like she got fundamentally what this movie needed to be. And so like we basically, you know, we wrote a love letter to being an, you know, Asian American Pacific Islander, like an other in the US and what that means.
yeah. And we're kind of tiptoeing towards spoilers. So if anybody wants to click off, feel free, because I do want to ask about something. How did you feel watching the film, you know, completed for the first time at the end when the father shows up? Because I was so unprepared for him to just show up looking like a snack. I just was not ready. Like that reveal, I was like, oh no, no. This is a family film.
So what's funny is I was prepared for all of that. Okay. So when I wrote the first draft of the script, I was surprised actually at how emotional I was when I wrote that scene. Because listen, I did not grow up with my dad. Clearly I have some daddy issues that I worked out in this film. Like clearly.
I won't talk about them on camera, but
I mean, like they're there. But when we cast him, I just remember being like, y'all, Kelly Hu married the most amazing looking man alive. He's so handsome. Yeah, no, I mean, I was fully prepared because I knew who we were dealing with. So like, I knew what he looked like. The thing that caught me off guard, and it's so funny that I wasn't prepared for it. The thing that caught me off guard, and to this day, like I've seen the film a few times and I still get teary-eyed when we see the footage of him with like when we see the footage, I lose it and I just start crying. Because when I wrote that moment, I was just like, I am going to write this really sweet moment and it's going to be like, aw. But like, there's something about it. And I think it's because it's not scripted. It is just, you know, he's just playing with his kids. It feels super real and sort of voyeuristic in a way where you're just like, you're genuinely looking at it, that it like punches me in the face, like straight up punches me in the face and makes me highly emotional. And I just cry every single time.
Yeah, well, because the thing is, you know, that you see the father at different points throughout the film because there's pictures and things like that. So you're aware of who he is and what he looks like. So you always have the visual, but just seeing him like
Brad's face is really good. Yeah, Brad's got an incredible face.
Where it's just like, surprise, bitch, I'm here. Like, like I'm here. I'm well lit. You know, the music is swelling. Like I'm here. It's a big moment. Yes, it is she, it is me. You know, I need to stop quoting memes. I'm so sorry. And I just was so unprepared. I was like, what is happening? Where, because it was like not just a twist, but because the film is pretty grounded in realism, and that was kind of the moment that where it kind of started to take on another dimension genre wise. I keep, again, you can tell that I'm tiptoeing where I don't know if I should just come out right and say it or if I should just keep it super vague, but because it doesn't really feel like a genre film until we get to that point. And when I say genre, I mean something that is happening that wouldn't actually happen in our day-to-day lives. It's
the one-eyed Willy moment. It's the moment where it gets a little fantastical. Yeah. But I think that like it is like my favorite moment in the movie. Like, yes, Brad shows up looking like a snack, but like I'm very pleased whenever people tell me they didn't realize what they were seeing until they saw those feet. And there was like a moment where it's like, wait a minute, because like we worked so hard to make sure you didn't see that coming.
I definitely did not.
Good, because like I feel like the real reason, like the point of that, like it has to feel like the unexpected, but like this is how it had to be. Like in order for this movie to be what it is, like this moment is absolutely necessary, but you cannot see it coming. Like it has to be like I'm very pleased with how it worked out. And like if you haven't seen the movie and you figure it out from this conversation, I don't even care. Like I have to talk about how it's like it's my favorite part of the movie. Like I'm glad we were able to do it the way, because like the thing I kept saying to Jude was I was like when we were doing rewrites and I was just like rewriting script, and every time anybody would want to like point at certain things, I'd just be like, no. Like anything that we do that gives away this moment, we have failed. Like I have seen way too many movies where I know from the beginning that this is going to happen because they like just signal it throughout the movie, and we cannot do that. Like we have to do the most minimal amount of storytelling on this end so that this lands, and it landed like perfectly.
Yeah, well, and I think Hollywood has, for so many decades, I mean, a century at this point, it's 2021, and we think about when did Hollywood really start to pick up? So it's about a century now worth of content. And there's very specific things that get told over and over again. Like maybe the form, maybe the form evolves a little bit and technology updates the setting, but there's certain archetypes, not just in characters, but in stories that get told time and time again. So when I'm watching the film for the first time, I definitely have this expectation because I'm so used to Hollywood bombarding me with very certain, very particular resolutions to certain types of stories, and capitalism is constantly being shoved down our throats. So I definitely expected the story to end a particular way because they're trying to do one thing, and everything is so about money and profit. And so I definitely thought it was going to end one way that I'm sure you can guess what I thought it was going to be. And then the fact that it didn't end that way, and that it was about something so much more meaningful that I think is great for everyone. I mean, especially kids, but everyone to, watch a film like that and to have that be the takeaway. It was just like, wow, what a lovely way to start off the new year of new content. Like I just watched Promising Young Woman, and now I'm watching this. Very different emotional experiences, but it's like maybe it only had to take a century for Hollywood to finally start evolving a little bit more,
Well, it's interesting, right? Because like I think audiences have been trained, like audiences are smart. There are certain tropes and certain stories that we have told time and time again that you expect, you think you know how it's going to end. There are certain movies that I see that I'm just like, oh, it's going to end like this, and it always does. And I think it comes down to the fact that there really are no new stories, but it's like, how do you go about telling them? Like you've trained the audience to see certain things so that you could queue up things so that certain things land in a certain way. And my whole thought was like, we need to subvert that in a way that lands more emotionally, but also we don't tip our hand. And it was like a tricky needle to thread, but I was like very pleased with what we did. And, to a certain extent, God bless the capitalism of it all, because it made you look over here when you really should have been looking over here.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, I preferred the way you ended the film, but definitely, if I'm just being bombarded with Hollywood content, I definitely expect certain things from them, and usually that is what they give me. But
and I have to give Netflix some credit because they were very good. I will say this: they told me going in that they would give me notes and like not be super pushy about them. And they gave me a lot of notes and they totally respected my process. Like I would do the ones that I felt like we needed to do. And they were very, like, if they didn't see something and they asked a question and I explained it, like why we didn't do that thing, they got it. They gave us a lot of freedom in terms of like what we wanted to do and what we needed to do. And like, it was like a, you know, I got to give them credit because I do think there are multiple times that certain movies come out a certain way because they are pushed to be a certain way. And so like, if you like, it is so hard to get anything made, and to make it a good thing, you have to have the right people in the right place at the right time. And so I think for us, we were fortunate in that, you know, I feel like we had the right director, we had the right studio executives, we had the right producers, we had the right actors, like everything fell in a place where like everybody was trusting the other person to do their job and to do the best version of it. And so they're like there was a lot of trust on multiple people's parts in how, you know, we went about things, and it worked out in our favor. So, yeah.
So, since you have mentioned Netflix, it's probably a good segue to talk about Shadow and Bone a bit more. So,
yeah.
For anyone who is listening or watching that has made it this far that does not know what Shadow and Bone is, it's a fantasy book series, a YA book series that is now being adapted into a television series, and you are one of the writers on the show. So at the time of recording this interview, all we have is a little bit of promo. There's the stag. And, you know, I was really touched when I read you tweeting, this must have been last year, when you were talking about Shadow and Bone and stressing how the fact that the protagonist was a half Asian girl, that was really the thing that made you go, no, I have to get on this gig. And it was interesting because I felt very similar. I didn't work on the show, but in the sense that, so I found out, I think I might have told you this in messages, but I'll, you know, share it for the audience. So I found out about the show because I had not read the books. I didn't know anything about it. I found out about it because I was really into The Punisher when it was airing on Netflix, and I was super devastated that they canceled it because Frank Castle and Karen Page never kissed on screen, even though my conspiracy theory is that when they were filming the elevator scene in season 1, at least one of those takes, they probably kissed, and like I need to see it for my own like emotional well-being. But, you know, Netflix never gives me what I want. So Ben Barnes was on that show, and obviously Ben Barnes has been around for a million years. He's very old, you know. God love him. I'm having a go. So, but, so he was the one who posted the cast announcement when that first went out for the lead 6 characters, because we have 3 from the Shadow and Bone trilogy and we have 3 from the Six of Crows duology. And then from there, that was how I was like, oh, what is this? And then I found out that they were changing from the book series that I had not read at that point, but now I have. They were changing the character to be half Asian.
Yeah.
Like, what?
Yeah.
Well, what do you mean? And then from there, you know, I've just been hooked ever since of just, where is the trailer? Where is the trailer? Where is the trailer? And a year later, still have not gotten the trailer, but we'll get there. So do you want to, sorry that I just went on a long tangent.
No,
but
it's all good.
Get the audience involved in my emotional journey with following this project. So do you want to talk a bit about that dynamic? I mean, you talked about it a little bit before, but now that we're really going to get into the show a little bit, not any way that's going to violate any contracts, just in a, you know, in a general sense.
I wish I could tell you much. I have, you know, I have my thoughts and my, I can't say the majority of things that I'd love to say. But like, yeah, I hope people like it. Like, I can't wait for people to see it. It's interesting because it's like, if you've read the books, you understand that, you know, this is the story of a woman who comes into power and she has to go through the journey of understanding how to wield it and how to wield it correctly. And we do that, except she's half Asian, you know, she's in this world, she's half Shu, and she grew up in Ravka, which is similar to like, it's like a second world version of Russia. And it is she is a character who essentially is put in a position where, I guess I'll go into book spoilers because this isn't really like, she is understood to be this sun summoner who hasn't, is
Yeah,
like
that's not
foretold
spoilers.
of.
Jesse May Lee's dad is like calling himself the father of the sun summoner on Twitter like every day.
It's also like a key component of the book. So I don't really know. Yeah, like, and then between her dad saying this stuff, like, I don't, like, if we didn't do the sun summoner, I really don't know why they would have bought the books.
Yeah.
That's a totally different story. But to me, that was like a fascinating thing because I was just like, this goes beyond the idea that a woman was the chosen one. This goes into the idea that somebody who doesn't even look like the people of her country is the chosen one. And what does that look like? What is the responsibility of that? And like this thing that is put upon her when, she didn't see it coming. And now that she has it, like, how does she wield that power? And to me, that is it is almost a really timely thing to discuss too, because it's like, we are living in a time where, we have a new president now who isn't Trump, but like in the last 4 years, Asians in particular, we had a president who blamed us for a pandemic, like who was completely comfortable being like, this is the China flu. And like there was a rise in racism against Asians. Like this is a world that we live in currently.
Hate crimes all over the world, which was also the worst part about that though, was that like, it was just bringing out the worst in everybody because even like in our own community, when I say our, I mean like Asian Twitter and like Asian film. Honestly, Asian Twitter gives me the worst headache. I swear to God, like I cannot get involved with the discourse. It's just, there's so many. See, it's ironic to me that white people homogenize us so much where they're just like, oh, Asians this, Asians that. And it's like, we have so much infighting that you don't even know about and you wouldn't even know how to like begin to understand. Completely. Like, I don't know how comfortable I am naming names like in the interview, but there are like people that, in our community that will say something stupid and then we get divided because some people want to ally themselves with them where it's like, no, we have to stick together. And the rest of us are like, no, you have to be clocked if you say something that you should not be saying, and it's just.
And it extends beyond that too, because like as mixed race Asian Americans here, there are Asians who don't feel like we're Asian enough, and that's another thing that I was like really attracted to, where it was just like the conversation of somebody being mixed race, where it's like, where does your allegiance lie? And it's like, what? What are you talking about? Like,
no, we are. Like, yes, we are.
Yeah. Quite frankly, if you are mixed race, you are part of like multiple communities. Let's say you're biracial. You are part of 3 communities. You are part of the 2 races that you are and a third race, which is like mixed race. Like, you know what I mean? Like you are in multiple communities. You are all of these things. And like, yeah, the discourse amongst Asians about Asian issues and then all of that stuff is like, it's very difficult. Like I'm super excited for people to watch this show, but I'm also aware that I'm like, listen, she is an Asian American lead, or not Asian American, she's Asian.
Yeah, let's give her flowers. Jessie May Lee. I'm so excited to watch her on the show. Here's the thing. I don't know anything about her. She's so new. Like she doesn't have a long list of credits, and that's so exciting for me to see.
Oh my God, dude, let me just tell you, like we saw her tape in the room and I could not have lit up more. Like I just like I'm in, my chair and I just like turn to look at everybody. And I'm just like, her. I was just like, it's gotta be her. Like she is incredible. Like she is stunning. She is an amazing actress. Like I came on this show. I left The Magicians to be on Shadow and Bone because 15-year-old mixed race Asian me wanted this show to exist. And I was like, and she's the lead. I'm sorry, you have to cast her. I was like, she's incredible.
I mean, I hardly even know how to talk about it with you and maintain my semi-professional presentation as the person doing an interview with you right now without getting emotional, because I'm just very easily emotional. And I already know that I'm just going to cry watching this show, just watching her do. I haven't even seen a trailer yet, but I just already know, because when you're talking about, 15-year-old me would have wanted to see this. I feel the same way. Listen, if I was, me back then, but now, like, me as an adolescent watching the show, and I haven't even seen it yet. I want to make that very clear. I don't want anyone thinking, oh, has she secretly seen it? And like, she's Violet. No, I haven't seen it, but on principle, I just know that if you had told me that I could have been the action heroine, you know, in the big fantasy series with the cheesy love triangle, and Ben Barnes is one of the pieces of meat that she's like getting pulled towards, like I would have been all in my feelings over that. I would have been like, oh, I can do that too? Amazing.
Right? I mean, like, I was like a nerdy high school kid who grew up reading high fantasy. Like, I loved, you know, Dragonlance and books like that, like Diane Wynne Jones, like Howl's Moving Castle. Like, I just was like a big old nerd for high fantasy. I loved magic. Yeah. Freaking to this day, I say that like I'm not into magic now, and I am so still into magic. But like this show to me, and like I hope people like it. Like it can't be like they're gonna be, you know, they're gonna be Asian Americans who watch it and go, "Girl, I don't remember. No, that's not me." Like there's no version of that. It's gonna blanket everybody. But like for me in particular, like I live like she's fantastic. I've seen it, so yeah. I think
and like, here's the thing: I'm not really into love triangles now, but you know, like when I was a teenager, they were all the rage. Like when I was just a little adolescent, you had Twilight, you had the Hunger. I mean, I wasn't really into the Hunger Games, but it was just every big YA franchise had a love triangle. So when I say I would have been excited about it as an adolescent, that's what I mean. I don't want anyone thinking that you're going to see me screaming on Twitter about ship wars, because I genuinely don't care that much. Like, I don't know how you're going to do the story in the sense of maybe I'll be more invested in it, but you know, I'm just more excited that it's just got all the boxes of like action, adventure, internal stuff as a character, but also the love triangle. I mean, it's just, why not? I mean, all the white brunette girls that have had the love triangles, like we should get a shot at the cheesy love triangle too.
Dude, oh, there's so many things that I wish I could say. I've seen it. I love it. Like I could go on. I love it. I was very proud of what I'm very proud. Like yeah. She's amazing. Jessie is. Oh, and here's another thing. I think I can talk about this because this has nothing to do with the itself. Like I didn't get to produce. I didn't go to set for this, but like my coworkers did, and like they could not have said nicer things about her. Like she sounds like just the most like lovely human being alive, where they were just like, oh my God, Jessie's so easy to work with. She's just kind, and she is genuinely a good person. And she was so giving to like her like castmates and just crew. And like, she just, I'm like, could not have asked for a better Alina, better actress, better number one on the call sheet. Super fucking proud to be involved in this. Super fucking proud that we got her. Like she's incredible. I love her. I think she's amazing. And like, and not just her, there are so many, like, you know, this is a beloved series. Both Shadow and Bone and Six of Crows. Like there are people who have their fan casts in their head. And like, I think it would be crazy to say that like we, the writers, didn't have our own fan casts. Cause you know, we all were trying, before we cast all the actors that we cast, we were all like, who should we, you know, like, who do you see in your head? What types are we looking for and all that?
I like that they're mostly unknowns though.
Totally. Like I suspect that after this, people are going to be like, oh, you guys cast everybody that you should have cast. Like who else? I can't imagine anybody else playing these roles, because all of the actors fell into their characters just so naturally. And they brought so much of themselves to these characters in a way that it was just like, just delightful. Like Kit, I could just go on. Like Kit is great as Jesper. Like
I'm so excited to see that. Listen, out of the main six, purely on book material, when I was reading them, I was like, Jesper's the best one. What do you mean? Like a swashbuckling, biracial, bisexual with a heart of gold?
Fantastic. Kit is so good as Jesper. And listen, I've heard discourse around Mal. Archie as Mal is like so good. Like, I think there are going to be a ton of people who fall in love with Mal. He is, like, I can't say anything, but in the show, Archie's so good. Like, he's vulnerable and sweet in a way that, like, in the room, we're just like, we want somebody who's vulnerable and sweet. And, like, amazing, and would go to the ends of the earth for the love of his life. And like, we found this kid and he's amazing. Like, he's just, they're all so good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I was excited about the idea of it being adapted because when I was doing research, because I got interested in the show and I went, okay, I want to make videos about it just to lay some groundwork so that people know that I'm aware of it and I want in on, Netflix, please let me do the junket. Sorry, I just had to put that out there. Manifesting. No, I promise I don't live in LA. I'm not one of those people. But so when I was reading it, I really didn't like that, and I think we talked a bit about this in DMs. I don't like that the trilogy is in the first person perspective where it's all in, from Alina's point of view. And I know that was the trend back in the day, but just where I am now, I don't really like to read that in a big fantasy where I want to explore the world, but you can't explore the world as well when you're just stuck inside the head of one character. So I immediately knew that it would be more interesting and to my liking because you get to actually spend time with other characters regardless of whether or not the scene has Alina in it. So that was automatically, it was like an incentive to be more curious about getting to see it. Because that's one of the fun parts about fantasy is the world building and exploring the world. So, I was immediately more intrigued because I just felt like I didn't get to know certain characters as well because you can only know as much as whatever Alina is seeing or experiencing right at that moment in time. So,
yeah, I mean, like, there is no first person narrative here. Like,
yeah,
it's not, it's very much, you're watching it from, you're watching characters do actions and say things. We're not in any of their heads. So it does open up the world a bit. I can't say anything else.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's not a spoiler. That's like
no.
vague.
But like, yeah, I'll be very excited to talk about it when it's out.
Yeah. No, I definitely want to talk more about it once you're going to be able to do that, because I'm sure we're going to have so much to get into, and then you'll be able to talk about your whole process with getting to do all that. One thing I did want to ask in a more general sense, and if you feel like it's getting too close, you don't have to answer it, but being that you're combining the trilogy and the duology, was that something that was difficult to do, or did you feel like it opened things up more, creatively speaking, like you had more creative freedom with being able to create the story for the show?
I mean, I think that is different for everybody who does something like that. For me, I prefer to open things up. Like, I have only worked on adaptations. All three of the shows that I've worked on are adaptations of pre-existing material. And the thing that I have found is that, there's a certain amount of, you want to do what's in the book, and then you also want to do your iteration of what's in the book. And I think the thing that's great about bringing the crows into all of it is that it gives us the opportunity to do a little bit of that. Because, you can't do 6 of crows. Like, you have to do, a little bit of your own material. So it's great because it gives the show a chance to be its own thing and not like living in the shadow of the books. Because, like, to a certain extent, if you do exactly what's in the book, you get Watchmen, the movie, not the TV show, but like, it's got to be its own thing. So me personally, I absolutely love that we had the ability to, like, make the show its own thing by like opening up the world a little bit with the crows and doing stuff that book readers won't know what to expect because they didn't read this part, like, this is all new to them. So how's it all going to go down? And like, there are no preconceived notions of how it should go down. And I'm excited for that.
Yeah, because that was definitely something intriguing to me because I figured that it would open things up more creatively because the way it's written in the books is that it's sort of different, not different timelines, but the trilogy is happening at this point in time, and then the duology is happening later. So if you're trying to get them to merge, then that automatically, to me, like, the only logical conclusion I can come to is that, well, then clearly you're going to switch things up a little bit and, move some stuff around. And I like that because then, assuming that you have people that are good writers, then they can do something really cool with that. So I thought that was exciting. So
it's been fun. It's been really, really fun because like, it's been like, how do we maintain the heart of this thing? You know, how do we pay homage and respect to what was there while like incorporating new elements? It's very fun.
Yeah. And
it's stressful though. I mean, it was a season 1 and it was a bananas show where it was just like, oh my God, this is so many characters. We can do it, guys.
Yeah. So I did also want to ask, the showrunner is Eric Heiser, who, of course, a lot of people know because of Arrival, and that being a huge success, a critical darling, a fan favorite on film Twitter. So clearly he's a very capable writer, but I was curious about how he was as a showrunner, and also in a general sense, what do you think makes a good showrunner for a television show? Because I feel like that's been a topic of discussion on kind of film Twitter, film industry Twitter. So
yeah, what's interesting is what makes a good showrunner is going to be different for everybody because no room is the same. The things that are always going to be in common are going to be, somebody who doesn't abuse your staff, somebody who knows how to knows what they want and knows how to make decisions, and somebody who listens. Like there are some universal blanket statements, but in general, everybody likes a room a little bit different. Some people like to be in a room. Some people like to be in a room for 2 days a week and then go, come up with stuff on their own. Everybody is a little bit different. I love Eric. I think he was a fantastic showrunner. I love him very much. I've been very fortunate. I've only worked with showrunners that I have liked and I would work for again. I don't have nightmare stories in terms of my showrunner being awful to me. Eric is great. He is a genuinely kind person with genuinely good intentions, who genuinely takes the steps to make those intentions not just known, but to execute on them. And I love him. This, he went from being a feature guy to showrunning a show, which is, look, I have been this is my 6th room. I've been doing this for a few years now. Showrunning terrifies me. And this guy was just I'm going to do it. And I think that he was put through the paces as any showrunner is, and he was thrown into the fire and he came out solid. I've seen the show, I love it. I think that Eric, he's great. He listened to us. He leaned on us. He specifically leaned a lot on the women in the room, but not in a bad way, in a very good way, where he was he trusted us and he counted on us, and we were honest with him and gave him our feedback, and he heard us. And so I loved working for him. He's great.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I was very intrigued by seeing, I think it was him who tweeted this, where he had said something about how, he and Lee, the author of the books, had talked together and come to that decision to make Alina be half Asian, because that wasn't how it was in the books originally. And the fact that both of them are white, to take that initiative, that's definitely something that stands out to me, because a lot of times it feels like, it's no secret that white people are getting more jobs than, people who are not white. But, sometimes it feels like the only times that white people are going to put more of a spotlight on people of color is because it's a trend, or because they don't want to be seen as racist or whatever. It doesn't always feel like the true integrity is there with their intentions. But, I haven't gotten any weird skeevy vibes from how they've been conducting themselves. So it's just I really appreciate that there are some people who are using their privilege and their platform to say, hey, why don't we include more types of people in this instead of just what we always do in this industry.
He's definitely one of those guys. He genuinely means it. His intentions were all true and authentic. And I think that it's so funny because if I only have one bad thing to say about Eric, it's that he's too nice. He's such a nice guy. He's super sweet. But I think another perfect example to illustrate just how open he is that I have worked on a bunch of adaptations, and I have never worked on an adaptation where the showrunner was so constantly in communication with the author of the original source material. You know, like I've never worked with somebody who was so willing to let the author into the process and run things by them in a way that felt like he was trying to make sure he wasn't offending them. Like it was a genuine thing. It wasn't like out of fear or any of that. It was a genuine sort of like, I love this material and I want you to understand that I love it. And I don't mean any like, and you as the creator of the source material, like will know if I've done anything incorrectly. So come in and see what we're doing. And how does this feel to you? Which makes his life a hell of a lot harder, but he does it anyway, you know, like,
yeah,
you know, the fact that he is willing to listen to that many voices to the extent that he is, it says a lot about him as a person, and they're good things.
Yeah. Well, I don't know exactly when the trailer will come out, but the show is going to come out in a couple months. So, I mean, I'm pretty sure it's any day now. So I'm sure we'll have you back on and we can talk more about it. And of course, after it's out, it'll be like, all right, let's just go through everything. Let's do a breakdown, like a play-by-play, a blow-by-blow. Every time Ben Barnes was scowling into the camera. Listen, the first time I found out his character was called the Darkling, I had to try to just not fall out of my chair from laughing so hard because I'm like, of course he would be playing a character called the Darkling. Have you seen his eyes? Of course that's what his character's name is. My God. And then I read the book and it's the most dramatic extra character that's just, no, you can't wear black. That's my color. I own the color black. And I'm like, oh my God, you are so extra. Like, I hope he makes it at least a little bit camp because I love a camp villain. Oh my God. Like, listen, Ewan McGregor doing Black Mask and Birds of Prey. Just so good. I love camp villains. Like, not to play into problematic stereotypes or anything, but just people who have fun with playing villains. Ugh. It's like you're playing a villain. Have fun. It's the best. Why would you want to play the hero? Heroes have to behave themselves. You play a villain, you can do anything.
I mean, it depends on the kind of hero, right?
I guess, but you know, the really morally upstanding beacon of nobility and all that. Like, oh yeah, sure. That's real. That's real.
I think that's some of the fun of Shadow and Bone. There are some and Six of Crows. Like, I wouldn't call Jesper necessarily the most morally upstanding of characters.
No, that's why he's my favorite.
I know. Kaz, it's like,
oh my God, the stuff I read about that when he's just beating people up, like I'm like, he's literally, okay, for anybody listening who doesn't know, this character is physically disabled. He literally walks around with a cane and he's the scariest guy in town or one of the scariest guys in town, where you make him mad and he will just beat you bloody. And I'm going, cool, I'm into it. Make it R-rated. Oh, it's on Netflix. They don't have to censor anything. Yeah, go for it. Beat some dudes until they're crying. Like, I want to see it. Let's go. I don't have time.
I think my favorite thing, I shouldn't say this. I was going to say there were some fan reactions to Freddie casting that were just delightful, where I was just like giggling in a corner being like, the wording of some of these is just like choice.
Well, and also because he was on, I watch Pennyworth it's on hiatus right now. And he had an episode it wasn't just one. I think he was on two, but one main episode where he was on as like a major notable featured supporting character. He was sort of like the villain of the week or one of the villains of the week. And he had this horrific line that everybody, you know, as soon as he got cast, the fans, they went digging through his credits and they found that line and they've just been quoting it over and over and over again.
Line?
Would you f your mum to save your life?
Okay.
He's a horrible misogynistic character, and that's why he talks like that. He just terrorizes the neighborhood.
Okay, this puts some things into context. It's been, oh my God.
He's trying to intimidate people, so he's like trying to seem ominous and threatening, and he thinks he can.
It works for Kaz, right?
Yeah.
Like that, it works for Kaz.
Yeah, so I'm surprised you didn't know about that since you're so clued in on Twitter and social media. I thought for sure you would have seen the fans just quoting that incessantly, because I've seen it.
I will admit that sometimes with fan spaces, like, especially on stuff that I work on, I keep to a certain extent my distance, just because to be perfectly honest, I don't think it's any of my business. Like,
Yeah.
When we did announcements and stuff, I did a little bit of like, what are people saying? But quite frankly, like, fans should be able to enjoy things the way that they want to enjoy. And it's none of my business what they're talking about. So I should just like leave them be so that they can enjoy it in their own way.
Yeah.
So yeah, I read some choice tweets and that quote puts them all into context now. And I'm like, I get it.
I thought for sure you knew, because that's like all I see anytime people are talking about him. They just start screaming that on Twitter to each other, to him. Like they just clip that one part of him saying that line because it's a period piece. So he's got the kind of swirly hair, you know?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh my God, this brings me so much joy. I love it.
Really looking forward to Shadow and Bone. Everyone who's listened this far, make sure that you check out Finding Ohana on Netflix. Shadow and Bone will also be on Netflix, so clearly you are just all over the place. It's been a pleasure having you on, Christina. Thank you so much for your time. I know I've taken up so much of it, but you are a joy to talk to. So hopefully you'll come back in the future.
Thank you so much for having me. I would love to be back.